Now we would like to start part two of the online press briefing from Hiroshima. I am Yano from the Foreign Press Center, serving as a moderator today. So in part two, we have Ms. Keiko Ogura and Mr. Fumiaki Kajiya to share with us their own A-bomb experiences and aspirations for peace. They'll be talking for 15 minutes each, and we'll spend the remaining half an hour for Q&A. As for the questions, there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen. So please enter your questions there, or during the Q&A session, please click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. You can start entering your questions to Q&A immediately after we start the briefing. Because we are providing a simultaneous interpretation service today, for those who like to ask questions directly by raising hands, please ask them in Japanese only. If you'd like to ask questions in English, please enter your questions in Q&A. For part two, there are no handouts to be distributed to you, but we will be sharing some screen. As for the interpreters from Saimo International, Yuri Yoshikuni and Noriko Sadamori will be the interpreters. So first of all, let me introduce Ms. Keiko Ogura, the Director of Hiroshima Interpreters for Peace, or HIP in short. At the age of 8, Ms. Ogura was at home approximately 2.4 kilometers away from ground zero when the atomic bomb occurred. While acting as a director of HIP, she frequently speaks in English about her experiences to the world. Now over to you, Ms. Ogura.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Keiko Ogura. The world is desperately fighting the pandemic. At such a time, I appreciate your taking your precious time to listen to me. I'm indeed very grateful. Thank you very much. I was listening to the mayor speak, and I felt that mayors were remote existences, but I felt that he was very close to me, and I was very happy. One thing, he said that he didn't hear about the atomic bomb experience from his parents. And I can understand his mother's feelings. To my own children, I haven't talked to them about my experience, atomic bomb experience. Most of the parents in Hiroshima cannot speak about that. And the reason for this is because the nuclear issue, what would affect our children, this is something that instills fear in us. And so I haven't told my children about the experience. And I felt that the mayor was a close existence for this reason. And the mayor is also an ordinary person who's working hard. And so I would like to talk about my experience and share my experience with you. It's indeed a wonderful experience, a very valuable experience. So I thank you for this opportunity. So please listen to me, bear with me and listen to me. In 1945, on the 6th of August, I was in my second year of elementary school. I had just become a second grader, and I was 8 years in age. And near my home, I was on the street. And that was 2.4 kilometers from the hypocenter. That's where I was. And this is 2 months from the dropping of the atomic bomb. This is a view from the hypocenter to the north, east, south, and west. Images from Hiroshima. And to the west, this is the bottom foot of the mountains of Koi, where the victims fled. And we're going from west to south. The white, what looks white is Hiroshima Bay. And as you know, everything was destroyed, including the stairs. And I looked at this scene after the radiation experience from the mountain. Who took this image? This image was sent from the United States, and most probably the person was sitting at the hypocenter, and it was an American, and he or she had also been exposed to radiation. I'm concerned about that. We're looking toward the east, and these buildings have been totally burnt down. This is the center of the business district. So these would be buildings of banks and insurance companies. And behind that is the business district of Hiroshima. You see a tall smokestack, and to the west of that is the Hiroshima Station. Right in front of Hiroshima Station is Futabayama, a range of mountains, and beyond the mountains, that's where I was. And around here is where I was exposed to the atomic bomb. As you can see, Hiroshima had been totally reduced to rubble. It was totally destroyed. Now, you are now looking at a map of Hiroshima. The red indicates areas which were totally burnt down. The yellow portion is where the buildings were totally destroyed. The white portion, areas indicated in white, is of course this area saw destruction, but it was half destroyed. And there are 7 rivers here. Now this is where I was, right here, around here. That's where I was. This is Hiroshima Station, Futabayama Mountain, and on the opposite side was where I was. Now this is an aerial view from the top, and this is Hiroshima Station. In front of the station, right here, is the Futabayama Mountain. Futabayama, beyond Futabayama, right here, is where I lived. And backtracking a bit to what I was talking about, I lived here, but I was born right here, around here. And this is a Peace Memorial Park. And it was close to where I was born. And I would often, with my parents, go to the Peace Memorial Park. And then I entered elementary school, and where it says 24, that's the elementary school where I was enrolled. That's within a radius of 1 kilometer, and about 60% of persons who are located within 1 kilometer had passed away. But right before the bomb was dropped, I moved to the other side of the mountain. And in the city, we could not build bomb shelters, and my father felt that the next target would be Hiroshima. And so in order to build a bomb shelter, we moved. This is the same location as of the aerial picture. That's Futabayama, and this is where I lived. And you can see the shrine gate. That's Waseda Shrine, close to where I lived. And here, close by, is Ushida Park. And my father, because he was not injured, he cremated several hundreds of victims every day. This is the elementary school. That is where I commuted to every day before the bomb was dropped. And this river is where a lot of victims flowed, and there were those who were injured. And several days after the bomb was dropped, there would be people at the foot of this bridge or hanging from the bridge. And here, my father felt that we were safe because there was some distance. But as to what happened, that's the morning of the day that the bomb was dropped. And my father suddenly said, Keiko, you shouldn't go to school today. And I asked why. Because I asked why, and he said the previous day, the air raid siren went off multiple number of times. And every time the air raid siren went off, we escaped to the bomb shelter. And because this happened so many times, my father said that something is abnormal and there would be something happening today, and so I shouldn't go to school. So I was on my own on the street. And then there was a flash of light and the surroundings went totally white. And then there was a blast wave and I was beaten to the ground on the street and I lost consciousness.
Now, this painting is something that was drawn by high school students in Hiroshima, Okamotomachi High School. When I realized it was all dark around, I couldn't see anything. But far away, I saw something on fire. It was a farmer's barn that was on fire. The roof, it was a straw thatched roof. So at this end of the flash, it started to fire. 2.4 kilometers away, but this straw thatched roof was put on fire immediately after the bomb was dropped. And I saw that and I went home. We were 2 kilometers away, yet this is what happened. So in downtown city, it was a disaster. Many people at the instance of the flash ended up dying, got burned. And in the darkness, what I heard was my younger brother crying. So I went towards that. This is how my house looked like. All the window glasses and the slides with the Japanese paper were all broken, and the pieces of the broken glasses were stuck to the walls and the pillars. And my father, because he was behind the big pine tree, did not get hurt. But my younger brother came out crying with his head bleeding. And however, although the house was destroyed, the rest of my family members were not hurt that bad. Now, I went outside to see the neighborhood, and in my neighborhood, the black rain started to fall down like this. Looking at my dirty blouse, I thought, oh my God, my mother is going to be upset. And around that time, my older brother, who was mobilized, he was over the mountain, but he came home. And at the shrine, many people fled to the shrine. I did not know this, but my older brother came home from the mountains, and looking from the top, he saw so many people coming towards us, fleeing towards us. So I went outside, and right in front of our home on the street, so many people were walking like this. And then, well, before that, if something happens, if you go to school or if you go to shrine, there should be a first aid station, and we should be able to find the doctors. That's why people aimed for the shrine. When I saw it, someone grabbed my foot and said, water, water. So I ran home and got some water from the well, and I gave the water to some people, and right in front of my eyes, 2 people who took water from me all of a sudden ended up passing away. And that night, my father asked me, I hope you didn't do anything. I hope that you didn't give water to those injured people. And until then, for those injured people or for the burned people, I did not know that I should not give water to those people. So I had to lie that no, I've never given water to those injured people. So I gave water to those people, and two people that were in front of me. Looking at that, I thought, well, I must have let those people to death. And I was terrified with that thought and with this fear, and I could not share that with anyone. And that stayed deep in my mind as a trauma. I had a nightmare and made me tears for a long time. And this feeling that I might have killed those people, I suffered for a long time from that trauma. On the following morning, I went up to the hill where the shrine was and looked down over the city of Hiroshima. So this is an island that I saw in the distance. I could see, but what I actually saw was this. From the next day, the city of Hiroshima, the people started to burn and cremate the dead bodies. So this smoke, big one, is the park nearby where the city was cremating. More than 700 bodies. My father also cremated, and he came home exhausted in the evening. What happened was, well, many people died in Hiroshima and got cremated, and elementary school kids were actually evacuated to temples in the suburban areas, and nobody told them until the day of when the war ended that the A-bomb was dropped. So those kids, all of a sudden, were told that your fathers, your mothers have passed away at the temple by the priest. And this burned out Hiroshima in 1945. More than 2,000 orphan children came back from where they evacuated. And that this is what they saw. They found out that they lost their parents, and they started having a very difficult time. But gradually, the movement to restore Hiroshima, and in 1957, after 12 years, this is how Hiroshima looked like after 12 years. And please take a look here. You see small shops, and this is the sign for a hospital, doctor, clinic, and this is the Peace Memorial Museum, which means that on the following year in 1955, or actually it's 1954, in 1954, the cenotaph for the A-bomb victims was established. On the following year in 1955, the Peace Memorial Museum opened. Did we get relieved with this? No, not actually, because there was already a new nuclear era with the hydrogen bombs. And with the new era from here, we found out there is a competition now going for the nuclear development. So what I'd like you to see is up until last year, this number is as of last year at the bottom. What I'd like to convey is that the thoughts of the victims is the very bottom. Let all the souls here rest in peace, for we shall not repeat the evil. That's exactly what we'd like to share with you. Please rest in peace. We will not repeat the same mistake again. So this message is the pledge for us A-bomb survivors who have gone through the despair, anger, and the sorrow for a long time, as well as the pledge by the entire humankind. I convey this to you, I'd like to conclude my talk today. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Ms. Ogura. Next, I'd like to introduce Mr. Kajiya. He is Secretary General of Association of Teachers, continuing to speak about Hiroshima. He suffered atomic bomb at the age of 6 in a national elementary school, about 2 kilometers away from the hypercenter. He passed on the torch as the torchbearer for Tokyo Olympics, Paralympics in front of the Cenotaph and the Peace Memorial Museum. Over to you, Mr. Kajiya. Hello, my name is Kajiya. The Second World War from 1939 is the year I was born.
And 2 years from then, that is when I was 2, Japan entered the Pacific War. And that war continued for 3 years and 9 months. I was 6 years of age at that time. I was in my first year of elementary school. At the time, it was summer, but there was no vacation. The school continued to offer classes from the 6th of August. Junior high school students collected at the Heiwa Peace Park to do work, 5,000, 6,000 of them. In the case of junior high school students, the first year, second years students were in cities, and the younger students had to evacuate to a safer location. On the 6th of August, on that day in the morning, it is said that it was 9 minutes past 7. The air raid siren went off. It sounded like that. And we hid. The air raid siren, however, at 31 minutes past 7 was lifted. It stopped. One B-29 bomber entered the skies of Hiroshima, and the air raid went off, and we evacuated. And the plane went away. On the at 7:31, the air raid siren went off. It was lifted. And so we went to school and we did our morning cleaning. In the first year of elementary school, we're still made to clean our classroom. And I felt that something was wrong, and I looked toward the window. In the skies of Hiroshima, very secretly, B-22 bombers had entered, and one plane had a different instrumentation, which they dropped using parachutes, and the other plane had the atomic bomb, the first atomic bomb in the world. Little Boy was the name, and that was dropped. The target was the entrance of Heiwa Peace Park, Kayoibashi Bridge, and it would be dropped from 10,000 meters, and so they would not hit the target. Around 600 meters above Shima hospital of Shima, the bomb exploded, and I was cleaning the classroom, and I was looking in the direction, and there was a tremendous light, a flash of light. And the next moment, there was a blast wave, boom, a blast wave, and the houses collapsed. The houses collapsed on our head, and we were trapped underneath the houses, and it was totally dark. And I tolerated for a while. After all the dust had settled, I saw some light above. In the torn ceiling, I saw a hole, and I desperately pushed away the walls and pushed with my head to escape out of that hole. The distance was 1.8 kilometers. The present Hiroshima station, it's in the western end. That is where I was exposed. And I somehow managed to get out. And in front of my eyes, I saw victims, hordes of victims, droves of victims fleeing. And so I joined the crowd and I fled.
And as was introduced earlier, I fled to the top of the mountain called Futabayama. In front of me, there was a river, but the river was already filled with so many dead people just floating around. What did just happen? I had no idea what happened, but I tried to follow the line, but not to be left behind to the top of the mountains. And in the middle, the houses nearby started to burn down. So if I was a bit late, maybe I could not have fled myself. From the time that I reached the top of the mountain, the city of Hiroshima right in front of me started to be on fire. The entire city of Hiroshima was a sea of fire. I remember it so well. And after that, I saw the city flaring up in a stunned way until later in the afternoon. Those who were in the same classroom with me, my older sister and the friends, the third graders, second graders, and other friends maybe, my older sister, my friends were killed instantly. The big pillar crushed them on top of the bodies, could not lift them up, could not escape, but they were killed instantly. And I somehow, because there were accumulation of pillars and under the tent, I was saved and I fled to the top of the mountains and I saw the entire city flaring up on fire. And later in the afternoon, I saw and I looked for my family. Behind the station back then was just a plain field. And there was a field for the military exercise. And there were lots of people gathering there as well. Thousands of victims of the people were there. And I looked through them to look for my father, my mother, my older sister. I walked around, but now that I look back, there is no way that I could have found my family. But fortunately, I ran into my neighbor, and my neighbor said, my family name is Kajiya. And my neighbor told me, you must be the son of the Kajiya family. He found me and took me to where my mother was. My mother was covered with the blood all over. Near the window, she was sewing near the window, and the window was broken with the blast. And on her body, 50 pieces of broken glasses, more than 50 or 60 pieces of glasses were stuck. One was stuck on into her eye. So my mother did survive afterwards, but she lost her one eye for the rest of her life. 50, 60 pieces of glasses were stuck on her, blood all over, and she was growling like this. And in this exercise field, the injured people, hundreds and thousands of injured people fled to this field. Some writer, the novelist, happened to be there and described his landscape as being in the middle of the hell. He described later on that he felt as if he was in the middle of, right in the center of the hell. I survived. I managed to survive myself. And 76 years have passed since then. Now, I am sharing my experiences to the school children. I have some pictures or drawings, so let me use those paintings. So as this is something I drew as I try to remember. There's an island called the Tinian. From Tinian, B-29 took off to attack Japan. 300s to Tokyo. And there is a city of Kure near Hiroshima. 150 B-29 took off to drop bombs. And the Japanese cities were burned one after the other. B-29. So we dug the shelter underground and evacuated, fled, hid. So these are the evacuation shelters. The morning of August 6th, my mother sent me off to school. My older sister, my mother. Well, this was the last moment that they saw each other while they were still alive. I was cleaning the classroom. I thought something was wrong. As nobody noticed, the first ever atomic bomb carrier, the atomic bomb was named The Little Boy, was dropped without anyone noticing. As we saw the map, this is where I was, close to the Hiroshima station, 1.8 kilometers away from the hypocenter. My older sister, my friends were killed instantly. I survived. I fled and fled and fled. I ran into a river, but river was filled with dead bodies. So I went over to this side of the mountain, the Bayama. I saw the city flaring up on fire. This is the instant that the bomb was exploded, this flashing light, and then this sound and blast. Back then, we didn't call it a bomb, but we called it the picadon, which means a flashing bomb. And the height of the smoke was 10,000 meters, 3 times as tall as the highest mountain in Japan, Mount Fuji. My mother was sewing near the window, so she was stuck with dozens of broken glass pieces, but hospitals, doctors were also damaged, so nobody could give her treatment. This is tough to see, but with the heat, light, this boy was burnt with the heat of the bomb. And I was crushed under the house, but I somehow managed to fall out. And I joined the line to run away. So when I went to the street, the riverside street, I saw the river with the dead bodies flowing around this Peace Memorial Park. The river was just filled with the dead bodies. The city of Hiroshima was burning. I just saw it from early in the morning to late afternoon. I was so stunned. Now in the late afternoon, I went back to close to the station, and I went to this military exercise field, and I looked for my family among all these people who were there. I looked for my mother, my father. I found my family. My mother was growing with blood. She could not receive any treatment. She was just growing, covered with blood. And I was so shocked. Next to her was my older sister, dead. My father somehow managed to save her out, but the big pillar was already on top of her, and my brother only found my older sister dead. And later in that afternoon, this is how the Hiroshima city looked like. The entire city was still on fire. Now, the children This is what I share with children or even the grown-ups. In the case of the atomic bomb in Hiroshima, within the 2 kilometers radius is what suffered, but the current nuclear weapons have more than 100 times bigger in terms of the effect compared to this, which means it will cover the entire Chugoku area, Yamaguchi, the Shimane, or the entire Shikoku region. Could be suffered just with one bomb, the nuclear weapon. And the radiation would even be spread in a wider area. So we have to end this with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We should never have the third one. As one of the hibakusha, that's how I strongly feel. Now, another story I'd like to share with you. Now, 60 years after the A-bomb was dropped, I visited Tinian Island. I was invited to visit Tinian Island. This is where the atomic bomb carrier, the Bolage, took off from this island. And I saw the airport as well. And the retired veterans from the United States were there as well. About 100 of them were there. And I had an opportunity to share my experience with them. I was a bit scared, but I ended up telling them, and they were so good to listen to me. I saw no strong opposition. And I also had an opportunity to have a discussion with Mr. Smith, who was a scientist, and Dr. Agnew, who was actually on the A-bomb carrier. I had an opportunity to talk with them. And we talked about these A-bombs. And we should make sure that there won't be a third time in any countries. So we agreed on that. And what I think now is that what I feel as a hibakusha A-bomb survivor is that we should never let the third A-bomb to happen. And people wish for that. We sang for that. And as one of the hibakusha, I still share that we should never allow the third time happen in any country. Now that I'm much older, I still hold on to that aspiration that we should never allow the third one. Thank you very much for attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Kajiya. So I'd like to move on to Q&A session. We'll take the questions from the members of the press, from the foreign press. For questions, please enter your questions into the Q&A. If you wish to speak in Japanese, you can also raise your hand with this raise hand button. If you can identify to which speaker you would like to ask as well. So if you have any questions, please enter your questions to Q&A. Well, we already have one.
So let us present the first question. This is addressed to the two speakers, Ms. Ogura and Mr. Kajiya, to both of you. From Bangladesh, we have Mr. Monsunu Haq asking the question. And the message and the experience that you've had, do you think that it is reaching the people that you wish to convey the message to? If not, what is the reason for that? And in that case, what more should be done so that your memories of that day make people everywhere aware of the dire consequences of the nuclear bomb? What more needs to be done? So that's the question. Could we start with you, Ogura-san, please, Ms. Ogura? Yes. it's very hard to convey. Those in Hiroshima and those, and I've gone to different places, such as the United States, and then there are different people I met with. The people in Hiroshima have the desire to learn more about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So it's easy to communicate to those in Japan, but going to the United States, there are about 150 citizens that I talked to and I met. 100% they felt that it was a good thing that the atomic bomb was dropped. Because the atomic bomb was dropped, Keiko, you live, they say. And they said, you could come here today because we dropped the atomic bomb. Otherwise, I would have committed suicide. I would have committed harakiri, and I wouldn't be here today. And I would have died had the bomb not been dropped. And it was a shock to me that this was their recognition. And I felt that in particular, I have to talk about this to those in the United States. And I started to talk to those in the United States about myself. That's 50 years since this happened. And I didn't want to talk about my experience, but I did. And the people in the United States I hoped would feel what it means to drop the atomic bomb. And the most important thing that I should communicate was to have them become aware of the truth and to share that with their colleagues. And I felt that if I continued, this would feed into world peace. That is what I thought. Ordinary people doing something. Thank you very much. Should we turn to you, Mr. Kajiya, please? In various forms, I have offered my testimony, but I do that most often in schools, in particular elementary school. During summer vacation, I would do that every day, going to different schools. The young people are divided. The young people create a group amongst themselves to conduct their own activities. And those hibakusha who have experienced the atomic bomb would listen very carefully. And that is the impression. But there are different views. And indeed, I went to Potsdam in Germany. And I went to the venue where the Potsdam Declaration was adopted. And according to what I heard from the Germans, Stalin, at the time of the USSR, was very shocked that the nuclear bomb had been developed by the United States. And after occupying Japan, the USSR, United States, the UK, and China would divide the country, Japan, into 4 parts, the same way that Germany was divided. And depending on how you think about this, because the US had nuclear, it ended up in the United States governing Japan. So I want to know what really happened, but it's very hard to know. If the end of the war had been prolonged more, there would have been landing in starting with Kagoshima or in Chiba, in Kurihama. The Allied forces would land in the mainland. That seems to have been the plan. If the end of the war had been delayed, they probably thought about the fact that there would be more sacrificed. And the emperor said that with this atomic bomb, this would be the end of the war. And this might lead to the annihilation of the whole of mankind. That is the thinking on the part of the emperor. Thank you.
So let's move on to the next question. From Ms. Eleonora Shimira from Russia. We live in a relatively peaceful time today. However, there are still wars going on in different parts of the world. But most people know little about what war really means, because the majority of us have never experienced that. So when it comes to wars and the nuclear weapons, they are still a major threat for us. So to us who live in the modern world, especially the younger people, what kind of message do you think we should deliver? So Gura-san, if you can go first. Thank you. So first of all, it's not just your own, but just like the COVID-19, just like the pandemic, the entire world need to work together and cooperate with each other. Otherwise, we cannot fight against this enemy. That's how I strongly feel. It's just like fighting against the pandemic. Therefore, for instance, if one country says, well, we are like this, we are like this, if you only think about your own country and nation, that should not be the case. You should not just care about your own country. That's why we need to spread the message. What I'd like you to think is that the difference between the nuclear weapons and the normal weapons, the A-bomb survivors in the Peace Memorial Museum, there are thoughts that are not displayed in the Peace Memorial Museum. We, within our mind, we have this pain, which we cannot share with the rest of the people, but our kids could be affected in the future with the nuclear weapons. How about our grandchildren? So this fear is something I'd like you to also think about. And then this hatred of your loved ones getting killed. And we have to overcome that as we have experienced the wars. Rather than going for revenge for that hatred, how to overcome that hatred is something that I'd like you to think about. And in Hiroshima, I don't want you to just learn about the disaster alone. This torn out city of Hiroshima has recovered to a beautiful town once again, as you see it now. And that's also something I'd like you to learn. We can do this, we can restore this. That's what I'd like you to take back. Learn both, learn the disaster and overcome, and do our best to create the future. Thank you. Kajiya-san, over to you next. So this is what I have. I'd like to actually donate this to the Peace Memorial Museum in the future, but with the heat of the A-bomb, this bottle was melted instantly with hundreds of degrees of heat coming from the radiation. This bottle was melted down instantly. And this also burned people. This should be avoided. This should never be repeated. And with the conventional weapons and the humankind, even in a day-to-day activities, there are some people who kill others. And I always have to wonder to myself, why? But a fight fought with the conventional weapons and the impact of the use of the nuclear weapons to the entire globe. Maybe those should be kept separate when we address those issues. So the current nuclear weapons, if they are used, the black rain, so to speak, including the radiation, the impact will be much wider. If the bomb is dropped in Japan, the effect is going to be 100 times bigger than the one in Hiroshima. It would cover the entire Japan or the continent or the ocean. So it's going to be a threat and crisis not just against one nation, but to the entire humankind. Therefore, the nuclear weapons should be ended with the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. 76 years. They have not been used in where people live. We should never allow the third time. The older I get, even stronger I feel that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to the next question. From Global Times in China, we have Ms. Son Chuvin, who has the following question. As a victim, what is your feelings toward the United States, the assailant? And did the experience impact your health? And also, if you know about the present status of radiation in Hiroshima, could you let us know? Could we start with you, Ogura-san, please? Yes. Personally, I was outside of the house, but I was behind the warehouse, and perhaps because of this, I felt that I had not been impacted much by radiation. But I was the only one that had a lot of nose bleeding, and I felt it was strange that my nose would bleed so often, and I felt it was strange. And I tried to forget about it, though. And after that, after the Fukushima nuclear power generation incident, I heard about children suffering from nose bleeding, and I felt that perhaps my experience was also due to radiation exposure. And my feeling is that people ask me where my wounds are. I say it's in my heart. The fear that the aircraft from the United States would come, and with a bang and boom, everything was burnt down. I had also experienced that before the dropping of the atomic bomb. So that fear is still there. And people dying right in front of my eyes. And the fact that I couldn't save them. And that chagrin and that fear and my sense of guilt, that is something that I continue to have. And things that are not visible, it's there. So please know that there may not be visible wounds, but these things are there. Thank you. Next, that's to Kajiya-san, please. Kajiya-san, please. Regarding my feelings toward the United States, Americans, my parents were all adults, naturally. To bear resentment against them is not something that they had. Present Russia, present USSR, they had very harsh views about the USSR, but this was the time of Stalin, and so they must have engaged in pretty horrendous acts. Very frankly speaking, it was a good thing we were not occupied by the USSR. This was something that my parents said. And personally, I was 6 or 7 years old. And so the occupation forces, the United States are coming in. I would follow the jeeps and I would cry out, "Give me chocolate, give me," that I was of that age. So I did not bear a grudge against any particular country. Perhaps the adults had different sentiments. That is how I feel. Give me chocolate. That is what I said. And being given chocolates, I was happy to have that and eat it. But people in my parents' generation perhaps had something about the occupation policy. And I remember them saying pretty harsh things about the USSR. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we've covered all the questions that we received so far. And it's about time to end this session. So if there's any one last comment I'd like to share from two speakers to share with the audience, the members of the foreign press and members of the foreign embassies, if there's one last comment from two of you. Ms. Ogura, please. Well, for us, A-bomb survivors or hibakusha, the number of nuclear weapons, rather than focusing on the number of nuclear weapons, 1 or 1,000, it's the same thing. Therefore, on this earth, on the globe, even if there's one single nuclear weapon, to think about that, that terrifies me. So at the earliest possible timing, I hope to abolish the nuclear weapons completely from the world. It's not just about, it's not an issue of the number. And there is less than A-bomb survivors. So while we still have surviving A-bomb survivors, I hope that we can realize the world without the nuclear weapons. For that purpose, I hope you will, I will get your support. Thank you. So Mr. Kajiya, anything from you?
This is an experience I had 76 years ago of the war. But war is such that if you don't kill, you're killed yourself. And that is the situation you find yourselves in war. And so people become demons. If orders are issued, naturally, you burn the town or you kill people. As I said earlier, presently, nuclear weapons are such that they have more destructive power of several hundreds of orders higher, and there are 130,000 of these, or 13,000 of these in the world, they say. And also, with the spread of radiation, I believe that there'll be a crisis facing mankind. And so the present power of the weapons is 100 times or more, or several hundred times greater than the atomic bomb we experienced. So the history, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, is such that people came to know of the nuclear weapons then, and it hasn't been used for 76 years since then. And I hope that that situation will continue where there's non-use of nuclear weapons. And I hope that everyone would continue to pray for peace and wish for peace. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So with this, we would like to end the online press briefing for today. Thank you very much to two speakers, Ms. Ogura and Mr. Kajiya, to share with us your very valuable experiences and stories. Thank you very much indeed. So at least on the atomic bomb day in August, we must remember what we heard today. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to the audience. This ends today's online briefing. Thank you very much for your participation.